February 20th, 2021. A cold winter day in Victoria, Canada. The kind of day where life feels ordinary. Trainers went about their routines. Visitors prepared to watch rehearsals. Nothing suggested that the stage was being set for horror. But sometimes, the most terrifying stories don't begin with warnings. They begin with silence. They begin with trust. And then, in one sudden, violent moment, that trust is shattered forever. In a tank of salt water, 3 orcas circled. To the audience, they were entertainers. To their trainers, they were partners. But behind those dark eyes lived instincts as old as the ocean itself. On that day, those instincts awakened. And what happened next would leave witnesses frozen in shock, and one young woman fighting for her life. Her name was Keltie Byrne. She wasn't just another trainer in a wetsuit. She was a daughter, a sister, a student who loved the sea more than anything else. She dreamed of becoming a marine biologist, of protecting the very creatures she worked with. Friends described her as bright, kind, full of laughter. She had a spark, the kind that made you believe her future was limitless. But dreams can be fragile. And in less than 10 minutes, everything she was and everything she could have been would be gone. That day, the pool became a battlefield. The water turned from sanctuary to prison. And the very animals she cared for turned on her with the merciless precision of predators. This is not just the story of a trainer. This is the story of captivity's darkest secret. The story of how love for the ocean ended in terror beneath the surface. This is the terrifying last moments of Keltie Byrne. Before we dive deeper into this story, I want you to do something important. Stories like this are not just entertainment, they are lessons. They remind us of the fragile line between human control and raw, untamed nature. So, if you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe to stay connected with the truths that too often remain hidden. Like, because each click helps spread awareness further than you know. Share, so that others can see the reality behind the spectacle. Together, we can make sure that tragedies like this are never forgotten. Keltie Byrne was only 20 years old, a marine biology student with her whole life ahead of her. To those who knew her, she was radiant, the kind of person whose laughter filled a room, whose presence felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. She had always been drawn to the ocean. As a little girl, she would sit for hours by the shore, watching waves crash against the rocks, dreaming of one day working with the creatures beneath the surface. By the time she reached university, that dream had sharpened into a purpose: to study marine life, to protect it, to devote her life to the sea. But dreams rarely come without sacrifice. To support herself through school, Keltie took a job at Sealand of the Pacific, a small marine park on Vancouver Island. For many, it was just a part-time job, but for her, it was a step into the world she adored. Every day, she put on her wetsuit, tied back her hair, and walked into the facility with pride. She believed she was helping, that she was building a bond with the orcas, learning from them, growing alongside them. She looked into their eyes and saw intelligence, mystery, even beauty. But behind those same eyes was something she could not have imagined. Because harmony does not live in a tank. Not when the tank holds frustration, rage, and instincts sharpened by millions of years of evolution. And in that tank were 3 giants. Haida, too, the dominant one. Fierce, commanding, the one who controlled the rhythm of the pool. Nootka 4, unpredictable, volatile, her behavior shifting like the tide. Antilicum, the largest male orca in captivity, weighing over 6 tons, towering, restless, a creature who had never truly known freedom. To the audience, they were performers. To Kelty, they were partners. But in reality, they were prisoners. Each day they circled the same small pool. Each day their cries echoed against concrete walls. No open ocean, no pod, no freedom. Their world had shrunk to glass barriers and rehearsed routines. And while Kelty believed she was building trust, inside those animals, something else was building too. Frustration, tension, a wildness that captivity could never erase. And on February 20th, 2021, that wildness would break free. February 20th, 2021. It began as a normal day. The marine park was quiet, the stands nearly empty, save for a few staff and early visitors. Rehearsals were underway, trainers moving in practiced rhythm, animals circling in the pool. For Keltie Byrne, it was routine. She had walked that poolside dozens of times before. She trusted her footing. She trusted the water. And, perhaps most dangerously, she trusted the orcas. But trust is fragile. And in captivity, it is an illusion. One slip, one misstep, was all it took. Her foot lost grip. Her body hit the surface. And in an instant, the calm of the pool shattered. The orcas reacted immediately. Not with curiosity, not with care. Predatory. Tilikum surged from below, a black and white shadow the size of a bus. The water exploded around Kelty as his massive body rose beneath her, cutting off her path to safety. She thrashed, fighting to reach the ledge, her arms clawing at the surface. Her scream pierced the arena, but before her fingers could touch the platform, Haida blocked her path. And then, Nootka struck. With terrifying precision, she rammed Kelty's side, spinning her like a rag doll into the center of the tank. 3 apex predators now surrounded her. And for the first time, the trainers watching from the sidelines realized this wasn't confusion. This wasn't panic. It was deliberate. They dragged her under. One moment she surfaced, gasping, desperate, eyes wide with terror. The next, silence. Bubbles. Black water. She reappeared, choking, reaching for life rings tossed into the pool, only to be yanked back under, her body disappearing into the depths. Over and over, they toyed with her, pulling her down, letting her rise, then yanking her deeper again. To the crowd and trainers, it looked less like an accident and more like a game. A deadly, horrifying game. Minutes passed, though to witnesses, it felt like hours. Every time Kelty surfaced, the look on her face was seared into memory. The sheer panic, the desperate fight for air, the wild, pleading eyes. But the orcas never relented. Haida would block her escape. Nootka would ram her again and again. And Tilikum, the largest, the most powerful, waited beneath her, dragging her down into the suffocating dark. To the trainers on deck, it was a nightmare they couldn't stop. They screamed her name. They threw ropes, poles, life rings, anything that might give her a chance. But each time she reached for help, a 6-ton wall of muscle and teeth pulled her back into captivity's abyss. What was meant to be routine had become unthinkable, and everyone watching knew they were powerless. If this story chills you, if you're beginning to understand the raw power these animals hold, don't let it end here. These moments are not just tragedies. They are lessons. Lessons about captivity, about control, and about the thin line that separates performance from predation. So let's make sure this story is not forgotten. Subscribe, so you never miss the truths that others often hide. Like, because each click helps this story reach more people, reminding them of the reality behind the spectacle. share, so others, too, can feel the weight of what happened and carry this truth with them. Because what comes next in Keltie's story will haunt you. Keltie fought with everything she had. Her arms thrashed against the surface, desperately trying to find air. Her hands reached out, fingers brushing against the life rings thrown into the water. But each time, just as her fingertips touched hope, an orca's jaws clamped down. A tail, a push, a sudden drag, and she was pulled back into the blackness. Witnesses say the scene was unbearable. You could hear her muffled cries breaking through splashes. You could see the violent churning of the water, white foam stained by the sheer force of 3 predators working together. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It wasn't play. It was a coordinated assault. Haida blocked every escape. Nootka rammed her again and again, each hit knocking the strength out of her body. And Tilikum, the largest, the most powerful, dragged her deeper and deeper. At moments, she surfaced, gasping for one last breath, her eyes wide with terror. Her arms flailed, reaching for the edge, reaching for anything solid. But the pool was wide, and the orcas were faster. The crowd screamed. Trainers rushed forward, tossing ropes, poles, life rings. Every attempt failed. Every time she neared safety, a massive shadow surged beneath her and yanked her back into the abyss. Some witnesses would later say it looked like the whales were toying with her, letting her rise just enough to taste survival before stealing it away again. And then, silence. The water stilled. No more splashes. No more cries. Seconds felt like hours. The surface was empty. Keltie was gone. And when her body finally floated back up, it was lifeless. Her skin pale, her hair tangled in the water, her lungs filled with seawater. Her young life, extinguished in front of an audience that could do nothing but watch in horror. A career built on trust, a dream built on love for animals, ended in the jaws of the creatures she thought she knew. Keltie Byrne's death was not a freak accident. It was a warning written in screams, in salt water, and in silence. A warning that orcas, these highly intelligent, deeply emotional apex predators, do not belong in concrete tanks. Yet, that warning was ignored. Instead of learning from tragedy, Sealand of the Pacific shut down, and Tilikum, the largest of the orcas involved in Keltie's death, was sold to SeaWorld Orlando. To the world, he was just another attraction. To the trainers, he was another performer. But beneath his calm, lumbering frame was a storm that no one could control. In the wild, orcas swim up to 100 miles every single day. They dive deep into the oceans. They chase prey. They live in pods, families that stay together for life. Their lives are built on freedom, connection, and communication. Every song they sing echoes through miles of open water. Every hunt strengthens their bond. Every calf is raised not just by a mother, but by an entire family. But in captivity, all of that is stripped away. The songs fade into silence, drowned out by pumps and filters. The bonds are severed. Young orcas torn from their mothers, shuffled between parks like property. And the ocean is replaced with a tank, a prison of concrete walls where boredom festers, aggression builds, and instincts turn violent. Keltie's death should have changed everything. It should have forced the world to ask the hardest questions. Why are we keeping apex predators in bathtubs? Why are we gambling with human lives for the sake of entertainment? Why do we believe we can confine the ocean into a glass box? But instead, her tragedy was buried, her story was silenced, and her name almost forgotten. until history repeated itself. Nearly a decade later, the same orca, Tilikum, would take another life, this time at SeaWorld Orlando, and the world could no longer look away. Keltie Byrne was just 20 years old, barely stepping into adulthood. A young woman with dreams, laughter, and a future that should have stretched decades ahead of her. But instead, her name was reduced to a headline. Her life folded into a tragic story, told only in whispers. She deserved so much more than to become a footnote in marine park history. Because Keltie's story is not just about a single moment in a pool, it is about a choice humanity made long before she ever stepped into the water. The choice to believe that creatures who rule the oceans could somehow be reduced to circus performers. The choice to exchange their freedom for profit. The choice to gamble with human lives in pursuit of entertainment. Her story should serve as a reminder that nature is not ours to confine, not ours to cage, not ours to dominate. Because when we try, when we take something wild, something vast, something ancient, and lock it away, nature pushes back. It always pushes back. Sometimes quietly, in stress and suffering. Sometimes violently, in ways we can't predict, but always inevitably. Keltie's life was short, but her legacy stretches far beyond that night in Victoria. Every trainer who ever stepped into the water after her did so in the shadow of her story. Every family who ever sat in the stands unknowingly witnessed a performance built upon risk, silence, and buried tragedy. And every orca, still circling endlessly in their tanks today, is a living reminder of the price we all ignored. Keltie Byrne was more than a tragedy. She was more than a victim. She was a warning. And a voice, one cut short, that still speaks louder than any scripted marine park show ever could. If Keltie's story moved you, if it shook something inside you, don't let it fade into just another forgotten headline. Because her life was not just a tragedy, it was a truth about power, about captivity, about what happens when humanity tries to cage the wild, and that truth must be shared. So please, take a moment, subscribe to this channel, so more voices like Keltie's are never silenced again. Like this video, not because the story is easy to hear, but because it deserves to be heard. And share it. Share it with friends, with family, with anyone who still believes marine parks are harmless fun. Because the world needs to know that behind every painted smile, every splash that makes an audience cheer, there is another story. A story like Keltie Byrne's. A story waiting to happen again, unless we choose to see the truth. Keltie was only 20 years old. She was full of dreams, laughter, and promise. And yet, the thing she loved most, the ocean, the animals she devoted herself to, became the very thing that took her. But her voice does not end here. Not if we remember her. Not if we carry her story forward. Rest in peace, Keltie Byrne. You were more than a headline. You were a warning, and you will never be forgotten.